It's so good to have you here. I'm so honored that you are here because it shows that like you actually care about something that I care about. So for the next 20 minutes, we're going to talk about what I call the CASH framework to help you understand what it means to have an effective leadership in a multicultural environment. So there's this saying in my culture, "Saya tak kenal maka tak sayang," which means that like if you don't know me, you're not gonna like me. So in order for you to like me, I'm gonna just briefly introduce myself. My name is Easterina, and I'm currently a resident director at Trinity Western University in British Columbia, Canada. I was born and raised in Indonesia, and I came to Canada about 8 years ago in 2016, where I pursued my education, my bachelor's in psychology and human services. And I've been here throughout those years. I've learned and met a lot of different people that helped me create passion for the multicultural community. So, throughout my time at Trinity, I was very fortunate to be blessed with amazing best friends that I get to live with, who deeply love Jesus and His people, and also the Christian community globally. So, when we used to live together, we realized how much we love our friendships, and that, especially the fact that it's very multicultural. And we realized that it's not really everyone's experience, and how it's like multicultural friendship is not too much of a thing in Trinity at that moment. And so we sat in our living room one night and we decided to write what we call our kingdom dream, which is our dream for our community to represent the kingdom of God that He said in Revelations, of like everyone feeling excited about like differences and like being friends with people from different cultures and stuff like that. So this is like the start of where my passion for teaching what it means to be in a multicultural environment started. So so we'll talk about what I call the CASH framework for the next 20 minutes of like each one, what the C, A, S, and H came from, and just like we'll dig deeper into it and also see how Jesus showed the example of using this framework throughout His life. So it stands for curiosity without agenda, and an acknowledgement of differences, sensitivity to culture, and the last one and most important one, in my opinion, is humility. So let's start. The first one is curiosity without agenda. So if you're in psychology, sociology, or like you've taken those classes, you probably have like heard about confirmation bias. Sometimes we get curious, and at times when we get curious, there's an agenda behind it. And what I call that is a confirmation bias. So confirmation bias is basically something that it started from something that we believe, which is based on our biases, our privileges, our upbringings, our values, and our experience. And then we try to find the facts and evidences that like back up our beliefs. And what we choose to believe and what we take from the facts and evidence is the confirmation bias, which is the evidence that we choose to believe. And the rest of the facts and the evidence, there's some part of it that we may ignore. So, and as a leader, we're not like having a confirmation bias is not something that we want to take and like something that we want to stay away from. And so the best way to express our curiosity is with asking questions. So what it means to ask a curious question? To ask a curious question, it means that like we try to avoid and eliminate our assumptions when we ask questions. To like really check our hearts and like if we have assumptions, do we have assumptions when I ask those questions to people, and then discern it and actually have wisdom from God on how to eliminate those things. So for example, this happens a lot throughout my time as an international student, where my friends who like just look like an East Asian person, people would just ask like, oh, are you from China? But also like there are a lot of different countries in East Asia. That's more than just China. But sometimes, like, because there's a lot of like Chinese in our community, people are like so quick to just like, oh, are you from China? It sounded like curious, but like there's an agenda, like or assumption behind it. So instead of saying that, I would suggest that you said like, oh, would you share with me about your home? And that gives them the freedom to express where they're from, to actually open up to you. And usually those questions would like those conversation would last longer than if you start with this. And yes, and then also because we live in North America where it's very diverse, there's a lot of people who come and go and immigrate to US or to Canada. Sometimes just because they're an individual of color doesn't mean that they come from anywhere else rather than the US or Canada. Sometimes Canada and US is their home country, so instead of like asking them where are you from and making it worse saying that like where are you really from, that sounds like there's an agenda behind it. You're expecting specific answers. So instead of that, asking like where is home for you, and let them actually answer and believe them when they said that, because they know themselves the most. So yeah, so that's curiosity without agenda. Moving into acknowledgement of differences. So it's so important for us to acknowledge our differences in order to be able to like know the other person and love the other person well, because sometimes we often just focus on the similarities between us and the other person, but when we do that, it really limits where our relationship would go further. But like when we acknowledge our differences and embrace that, then that's when we're able to like really develop that like relationship and get to know them better. And God has the vision of like what the kingdom looked like in Revelation 7-9. He said that after this I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, tribe, people, and language, standing before the throne and before the Lamb. They were wearing white robes and were holding palm branches in their hands. This passage reminds us that like God's kingdom is diverse, but also is unified at the same time. And how beautiful is that for us to like know that like God created us very uniquely, that everyone is different with their own things that they bring, with their own backgrounds, yet we're all his people that he loves so dearly. And he calls us to like reflect this unity in diversity in our own lives and communities, especially when he has trusted us in a position of leadership. So yeah, so why do you think God created differences and why it's good for the world? I think from like learning it and like experiencing it, differences is not something that is created for division, but instead it's like something that should bring us together. Because if you like frame it in a way that it's like, oh, if we're different and we have different experiences, come from different background, it means that like you have some things that I don't have and I have some things that you may not have. So how do we like come together and like learn from each other so that we can grow and be better? And yeah, so like looking at it that way, and that would really help you to understand it. And also like to ask ourselves that like, how can we use one another's differences to be the best version of one another instead of focusing on how it creates division. And also like keep in mind that acknowledging and embracing our differences is not the same with blind acceptance. It requires a lot of wisdom, discernment, and also humility to know. And yeah, so next one is the sensitivity to culture. So cultural sensitivity is something that is like an ongoing lifelong process of learning. It's not something that you learn today. I did a whole like workshop about it, or like I was trained for like cultural sensitivity and stuff like that, and so I'm a pro. It doesn't work that way. It's something that you have to continuously learn. And the first step for this is to assess our social location, which we'll talk more soon. But without the willingness to assess our social location, acknowledge it, and also understand it, we often find that we fail to gain the skill to be sensitive to cultures. And then worst case scenario, that like we ended up hurting people more than helping others. So social location. Social location, look at the different factors that are like given to us that make up of who we are. So like highlight the word like given to us. It's a social position that like an individual holds within the society, that is like based upon social characteristics that like the society thinks is important, or like define the opportunities you get and who you are, the way that people treat you and stuff like that. So these factors include gender, ethnicity, race, nationality, your family structure, either your family origin or like your current family structure, your birth order, your language that you speak, education, social class, age, physical and mental ability, your religion, your sexual orientation, geographic location, major and occupation, seniority, and then introvertness or extrovertness. So as we assess and acknowledge and understand our social location, then it's important to like also ask these questions. I encourage you to like just like maybe pause and then like take a note of these questions, or like screenshot it and actually go through the social location activity with your team and like go through these questions, and like that will help you to like understand each other better and know how to support each other better and stuff. And yeah, so that's sensitivity to culture, and now we're moving to humility. I think humility is the most important thing of all of this, and surprise, surprise, humbleness and humility is mentioned 52 times in the Bible, and this shows that like why God mentioned this a lot is because of its importance. As us Christians, we're called to like continuously humble ourselves, and like Jesus himself really modeled this really well. And when we live in a multicultural culture, especially as a leader, we're required to first unlearn and then learn and then relearn. So unlearn involves letting go of our own knowledge and beliefs, and this posture is really important for us to help us grow and be willing to take feedback. And this is like a really like important characteristic as a leader as well, to like know how to take feedback. And then learn is to actually implement the knowledge and the new skills that we learned. When we are given feedback, part of humility is not just like listening to it or reflecting on those feedback, but actually like praying to God, asking God, giving it to God, and ask Him to give you wisdom to know how to implement that, how to like process that new information, and then actually using it for His kingdom. And last one is relearn, which is like to have a humility that like learning is an ongoing process that you learn throughout your life, and it's not just a one-time thing. So to have the posture that like I'm always learning and I'm willing to learn with people, from people. So the best way to like really learn this framework is through looking at Jesus' life and how he modeled this throughout his life. First, curiosity without assumptions. He asked questions without assumption in his conversation with Bartimaeus. And then he also listened before he jumped into conclusions. In his conversation with the Samaritan woman at the well, he knows about her, who she is, her story, without her even having to explain. Yet he's willing to like listen and just sit there with her and understanding her, and also still loving her and be gracious with her as well. And he also showed curiosity and openness to learn as he engaged in like group discussions and listened to the leaders when he was younger. And so with acknowledgement of differences, he also celebrated the beauty of differences, and as he said in Mark 11:17 and Revelation 7:9-10. And he also mandated this to his followers about unity and diversity. He modeled the importance of like acknowledging our differences, seeing the beauty of it and the value of it, and also celebrate it. He shows that like by acknowledging and embracing our differences, it fosters, instead of creating division, it fosters unity. And the third one, sensitivity to culture. He ministered beyond his culture and as well as his cultural boundaries. He showed inclusivity to reach to other cultural groups with grace and compassion. It shows that like through his interaction with the Samaritan women and the Gentiles. He also used parables and illustration that resonated with the cultural context of his audience, and not just pushing of like what's right in his cultural context or his cultural upbringings. And also he engaged with cultural practices and social norms to reach people where they're at. They meet them where they're at. And as this shows, like when he attended the wedding, the way that he interacted with people, and also in the marketplace setting in Matthew, and also the way that he participated in the communal meals. He shows sensitivity to culture and like adapting to the need of the people that he served without discounting his own culture, values, and the truth of his teachings. Last one is humility. He demonstrates servant leadership. This shows when he washes his disciples' feet. And also he called his disciples to live with humility, and that like we're also his disciples, so that's something that he also calls us to do. And throughout his life and his teachings, he really exemplified humility in the best way possible. It serves as like the ultimate model of humility for all his believers to follow. So I'm just going to leave you with a question. So how do we, as a follower of Jesus, model this framework to our leadership? So I encourage you to talk about this framework with your team, and maybe like look into different scenarios that might happen in the past and how you would have like done it differently, so that you can, it's something that you can learn. And yeah, if you want to talk more about like different frameworks or different tools and things like that, please reach out to me, and I'd really love to talk to you. But thank you for being here. I'm so honored to have you here, and hope that in this conference that you learned a lot and are able to apply that in your leadership.